Okay, welcome to part 5 of 2 Signs and Coincidences from God. Hope you guys are enjoying it so far, and if you're actually watching part 5, then I guess you're you're kind of getting into what's going on here, because things are going to start really heating up here. Um, so this next part is kind of special because uh, this is the day that God first spoke to me in a way that I've never heard of before. I've never heard of anybody talking about it, but it says in the Bible, "My sheep know my voice." And if you believe that, this stuff happens. So here we go. All right. The next day, it is now 2:35 p.m. Mountain Ash plays in 25 minutes. They are friends of mine, and I had met when I came to my first jam in 1998. But I didn't really get to know them good until my second jam. I helped them set up their website. Kevin, one of the band members, knows how to make web pages. He just needed a little help with the HTML coding and how to get the files uploaded to a server, and then he could pretty much figure things out on his own and now makes updates when needed. During the Mountain Ash concert, I talked to Mark and asked him where I could go to take pictures of them while they played on stage. He said um, he said I could go anywhere I wanted to, just don't go in front of him. Laugh out loud. The band members are Roger, Mark, Gary, and Kevin. I went right up on the main stage during their set and took pictures, and then went down in front of the stage. After I took quite a few photos, I went into the crowd to enjoy the rest of the show. Even though I could have stayed right up on the stage or right down close by the stage, the best view and the best sound is out in the crowd. Plus, it's more fun to be out there and dance or be near where there are other people dancing. I was standing out in the crowd now and watching Mountain Ash play. I noticed that this earlier crowd was mostly standing in pairs of 2 people. It was rather odd. Everywhere I looked, I saw no large crowds, just twosomes. I mean, going back, it was odd. It was two everywhere in this entire couple acres of people standing in this field watching this band play, spaced out, not a real gathered crowd, not tight, just spaced out. Twos. There weren't 3 people anywhere. There weren't 4. There weren't 5. There wasn't a group of 8 people. There was nothing. There was just twosomes everywhere. Except me. I was standing all alone. I kind of stood out being alone. Just as I had that thought, a total stranger came and stood next to me. Someone I would have never said anything to in my past. I thought, how cool. I am not standing here alone anymore. Thank you, Father. Then I thought there must be a reason that he came and stood by me, so I introduced myself and said hi. I asked him his name. He replied, Tony. It took me a long time to talk to Tony. I sat and thought for a moment that I knew I was not alone anymore. I then felt a deep emotion come over me. God put words into my heart, and for the very first time in my life, God spoke to me so clearly. It wasn't in a voice, but it was like an overwhelming thought that came into me, and I just knew. I didn't think of it on my own out of the blue. He said 5 words. Be at peace with God. It was spiritually holy for me. My body felt lifted and full of joy. When I thought about what he had just said to me and what it fully meant, I turned and walked away from where Tony was standing, and I wept. Tears of joy came down my face. I was so happy, and yet I was standing there with tears rolling down my face. What an experience. It felt great. I had on my mind always of what God was thinking about me. Almost like, I'm going to add some stuff here, almost like I wasn't worthy. I wasn't worthy. What does God think of me? I wasn't perfect. I was still making mistakes, you know, and I'm just thinking, boy, what does God really think of me? And then this happens, and it just floored me. That's why I wept. Yeah, it was just amazing. Well, and God knew that I was kind of having troubles in my mind. He knew that, and he said, "Be at peace with God." And then I wrote this down, and something came to me that said, He wants to be loved and forgiven too. Now, some people can't or won't forgive God for some things that have happened. There are some things that we just cannot understand. Why do some people die? Why are there certain disasters? I don't know what God could ever do that he would need to be forgiven for, but I would forgive him for anything, and I do love him. How much has he forgiven me for? And so I wrote it down. It was such a revelation. It was like an answer. Was it an ending? Would the twos stop now? And all of this happened during the Mountain Ash concert. It was kind of a surreal moment. I mean, it was just like, wow, okay. Well, the twos did not stop. They became even more incredible. I walked back to the campsite and stopped by Tom and Holly's campsite along the way. Tom said to me, "Mike, I don't know if I've ever showed you this before at past jams, but take a look at this." He showed me a scar on his hand near his thumb. He then said that he was born with two thumbs. I would have never known that. I never bothered to look at his hand to notice the scar and slight deformation near his thumb. I thought that was just, I mean, how rare is that? I mean, we're talking about twos, but things happening twice consecutively, things that do. This guy just comes out and he knows I'm looking at twos, and he just shares this with me. One of the guys that was one of the really good friends of the jams that I would go to, and yeah, two thumbs. That was just like, wow. Okay, at 4:20 p.m. I had the urge to quit smoking. It had to do with the clock in my camper. Okay, so little this is many years later now, so I'll kind of go over this. When I got saved, it was really easy to, quit drinking, getting drunk. It was easy to stop looking at porn. It was easy to stop doing a lot of things, but smoking, God used that. That was a tough one for me. Eventually, I quit smoking, and that's probably later on in my testimony here that you'll read about it. I'm just kind of throwing that out there. But so I'm a brand new Christian, got rid of a lot of stuff right away. but I couldn't kick the smoking. So that's kind of where this is. Someone set it to 4:20. It had to do with the clock in my camper. Someone set it to 4:20, and it doesn't have a battery in it. I changed the time yesterday to 7:11, and then again today it was changed back to 4:20, so I reset it again to 7:11. I keep yawning every time I do this. Brent and Joey were changing it. I found out as a joke. They said 4:20 was supposed to be some kind of an international sign for catching a buzz. They like to fool around, a couple of jokesters. But at that moment, I stopped smoking for one full day during the jam. 24 hours and 20 minutes later, I grabbed another pack of smokes. In jams past, the clock was always set at 8:10. And this year, they said to me that I shouldn't be so cheap and buy a battery for the clock. I have since then quit for a few days here and a few days there, but can't seem to muster the willpower to quit all the way once and for all. I will just keep trying and praying about it. When I set the clock to 7:11, I had no rhyme or reason for doing that. I just did it. I flipped the clock over and began spinning the little wheel, and just so it didn't say 8:10 or 4:20 was all I was trying to do. There is a store named 7-Eleven, and it also rhymes, so I think that is why I set it to that time. But on the day that I quit for one full day, the date was July 11th, 2003. 7/11/03. Now I'm just gonna stop and say the day that I quit for good was St. Patrick's Day 2007. And that St. Patrick's Day is 3/17/07. So that doesn't 3/17/07. That's the day I quit for good, and there's an amazing story about how that happened. Wow, oh, that's a jaw dropper. When I realized the oddity of that date, coupled with the time that I had picked and changed the time on the clock to that time twice, that is when this thought came over me to quit. It was like I needed to do that at that time, right then and there. I told everyone that I had just quit smoking, and I did. The next day, they all saw me smoking again. And even though I started again, the fact that I did it for one day during the jam seemed very significant to a few. I felt like a failure. But just after I quit smoking for the day, two ladies came walking by our campsite and stopped in to rest and to finish their drinks before they went into the jam fairgrounds. They saw me writing in my journal and asked me what I was writing. I said to them, "This is the neatest journal you have ever seen." This grabbed their interest. I asked them if they wanted to hear some of what I was writing, and they said, "Yes, please do." So I flipped my journal pages back to the beginning, and while I read it, something incredible happened. I started reading it out loud. On the second day of the Moondance Jam, my dad gave me this journal. It was July 10th. Obviously, today's the 11th. It was July 10th, 2003. Let me describe the current scene. There are 6 of us sitting under a canopy keeping dry with a slow burning fire. Now, as I read just this very first part, my dad and uncle, as well as those 2 ladies, all began laughing and saying, "Ooh." As I was reading my journal to them, I thought, what was so eerie that they would do this? Well, as it turns out, there were 6 of us again, and it was raining, and we had a fire going again. So this is why they had ood, because it was the same. It was exactly the same as the day before. A day later, the scene was the same, but some people were different. I continued reading while everyone was silent. My dad and uncle are 2 of the 6, and they are here with me along with some good friends. As I read that part, this was again also true, as my dad and uncle were also 2 of the 6 again. More oohs came from the group. I continued reading. Amy, Melissa, and Holly's sister Kay. What I read out loud this time was different than what I wrote yesterday, because yesterday I did not know or remember what Holly's sister's name was. Yesterday I wrote just Holly's sister. Later that day I asked her name again and then remembered it. So this time while I was reading it out loud, I said it just like I wrote above, when I said Holly's sister Kay. The 2 complete strangers, 2 random women who just happened to stop by and take a rest out of the short sprinkling rain and finish their drinks, were simply awestruck. And so was my dad, uncle, Amy, and I. For instead of the 6 being myself, my dad, my uncle, Amy, Melissa, and Holly's sister Kay, there were now sitting here with me a day later, my dad, my uncle, Amy, a total stranger named Holly, and another named Deborah Kay. Wow, the 2 ladies thought. That is wild. They had to leave and they went into the fairgrounds. But they were like freaked out, like, what the heck? What? That's wild. Because we didn't know them. For me to just write that, and everything was the same as I wrote 24 hours ago. They were like, okay, this is almost weird, man. This is crazy. They like got up and go, and they were like, they might have thought about that for days. I have no idea. But me, I'm like, okay, this is like Twilight Zone stuff. That was just kind of wow. I still think about that moment, and I'm like, what are the odds of that? Anyway, oh, so this lady's name, one of the ladies was Holly, and the other lady was named Deborah Kay. And so when I said Holly and Holly's sister Kay, the 2, Holly's sister Kay, they were like, what? And that was just crazy. I began to think, am I going to see a repeat of things that happened to me yesterday? Well, 2 very significant things that happened yesterday were the double rainbow and the 2 northern light shows. It was sunny out right now, and it was sprinkling. There was one big cloud over us, and it was a very short rain that would not last. I thought about this, and I went out from the canopy and looked into the sky, but I saw no rainbow. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. Oh, then I thought about it some more, and I thought, in order to see a rainbow, the rain has to be away from you. You can't be in the rain. So anyone who was west of us, or like back in the town of Walker, looking east, seeing the rain, they would have seen the rainbow right over where we were. So that night, Chad came over to play guitar again, and we again saw an even greater Northern Light show for the second night in a row. And one thing I remember about this too is, I didn't write it down, I don't know why, but my uncle was He was like, "There's no way, my uncle's. There's no way you're gonna get Northern Lights 2 nights in a row. It just don't happen, Mike. It's not gonna happen." And I'm like, "George, this is kind of a miracle day, man. This is all. I mean, God's orchestrating this. Are you telling me God can't put the you know? I mean, So I didn't write that down, but you know what? There was another Northern Lights show the second night in a row, and even my uncle was like, "I don't believe it." You know, since we only saw one light show that night instead of two, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm guessing that the folks who saw a rainbow today from the town of Walker, which is west of us about 3 miles or so, must have seen a single arched rainbow over the top of the Jam Fairgrounds. Mike just walked by our campsite. He's the guy with the USA Peace sign hat. I introduced him to Brent, who was with me at the campsite. His girlfriend Jilliana was there also. Mike walked up to the canopy, and we were under, and he was wearing an AC/DC shirt, a rock and roll band. The funny thing about this is that last year when I met Brent at the casino, I was wearing an AC/DC shirt. So here I am now introducing Brent to another Mike who was wearing another AC/DC shirt. I like the beat of many AC/DC songs, but now I am not too keen on the words they often use in a lot of their songs. My taste in music is changing. This may also reflect that I used to be on a highway to hell, but now I am on a different path, and if it were to be compared to a highway, I would say it is compared to the no speed limit Autobahn in Germany. I can't seem to go down this new path fast enough, but at the same time I know that I could not absorb everything that is coming to me that fast. I am so new in Jesus. Patience is what I need. It would be like you can't start feeding a small baby the meat and potatoes by feeding them some steak. Why is that? Well, I think you kind of have to, give them the spiritual milk first. While I was just in the camper, Melissa and her mom Judy stopped in and asked if I had some chewing gum. I immediately handed her some from out of the gift bag that we had gotten from the Coleman Camping display booth. It took only 2 seconds after she asked for some gum for me to turn around and quickly hand it to her. I then had one of those overwhelming thoughts pop into my head that I had to write down after I said this to Melissa twice in a row. The first time I said it, it sounded so good, and so I said it out loud again. Here's what I said. I said, "You get what you need right when you need it." It seemed like this was given to me to think about as to how God often works with people. While I was writing this down, I had numerous distractions that were hard to avoid. And to be able to write without being interrupted, if I would not have written this down quickly, I knew I would forget it. It seemed important that I write it down. And you know what? I'm glad I wrote this down, because years later now, reading this over again, I've forgotten this. And this is so true. This has popped up in my life when I've needed something. Boom. I needed help. This guy comes out of nowhere. "Hey, do you need some help?" I'm like, "Yes." This is really good. But this is really true. With God, a lot of his ways of doing things it's all about timing. And man, does he come in at the right, perfect time. You get what you need right when you need it. I need to remember this. I hope you do too. I was sitting under the canopy a short while later, and Melissa and her mom were sitting there with me. I noticed something that I have seen before at all the other jams, but only now did I realize it. There were two handicapped jammers camping near us. They each had these newer four-wheel drive looking wheelchairs that would go through the rougher terrain and muddy areas in the campgrounds very well. In past jams, I have seen them in other wheelchairs, but I never ever talked to them. And this year, their newer, sporty, four-wheel drive looking wheelchairs caught my eye. I don't know why, but for some reason I looked over at Melissa and asked her if she knew those two people in the wheelchairs. One guy and one girl. She said no, that she did not know their names. I said, well now, I just bet that there is a significant 2 with the names of these two jammers. The two jammers who were in wheelchairs camped at different locations and probably did not even know of each other. But they always passed by our site, as almost everyone in our area has to get into the jam. I felt the urge to run after them and talk to them and introduce myself. And so off I ran, chasing the man in his wheelchair. Those new ones really move fast. I caught up with the guy first, and I found out that his name was Bill. I thought, nothing too odd about that. Then I went to talk to the woman in the wheelchair and introduced myself. Her name was Kay. Another K, I thought, but her name was spelled with no E on the end. And then I thought about it for a minute, and then it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I got a big smile on my face. I went back to the campsite, and Melissa asked me with eagerness in her voice, well, what are their names? Tell me. I laughed, and I told her that she would have to read the book to find out, but that it was a very interesting too. You see, the two people who own and operate the Moondance Jam are husband and wife, named Bill and Kathy Below. If you take 2 letters out of the second name, Kathy, you would have Bill and Kay. I asked Bill his name first, and Kay her name second. Well, Bill and Kay, I'm glad I now have got to meet you. I'm wondering why my thing is messing up there. If you can see that, it's kind of like my paragraphs are messing up. Not all of them, but some of them. Earlier in the afternoon, Chad stopped by wearing a Boston. Oh, this is gonna be good. Oh. This is gonna be good. You know what? This has gotta be the next chapter, the next part. I think we've been going for about a half an hour. You guys, this next part, so this is gonna be the end of part 5, and part 6 is gonna blow you away. Part 6, mind blown. I hope you come and check it out. God bless. Thanks for coming and listening.